This episode is sponsored by socialjobs.com, where jobs go to get social. Check them out to advertise your jobs socially. Yeah, we're on episode 16, which is also life past 7. When it comes to work, 7s are the analyst, by the way. Today we're talking about careers and different decisions that you make throughout your career. So there might be times when you take a step back, take a lateral step. What does that look like? Some of the decisions that came in between there, and hopefully it helps some people out with where they are in today's world of work. I've been reflecting on it for a while, probably the past couple of years, as I look at how my journey is shaped out. And every now and then I stop and I think about, how did I end up where I am today? And I track back to, what did that journey look like? Going from, corporate talent acquisition, which is, what was the golden lion and part of the golden lion, starting there and having that point in time where I wasn't able to spend enough time with the kids. They were in daycare for a really long time. I was going from, and when I would go into we called it the employment office back then. I mean, I'm dating myself. The max time at the daycare was 10 hours. And Caleb was in the Golden Lion daycare. Brandon, because he was younger, Bub was at an in-home care. And I would go and I would drop Caleb off. I would walk to the office in the doors. I would work for 10 hours. I would come back, go get him. And then I would go and get Brandon. So by time the youngest, it was like 14, 15 hours, I was gone because I was always doing the max daycare time and bringing Caleb back to the office. There came a point in time where they told me I was leaving early to go take Caleb to a basketball game. And it was one night a week. I had to leave at 5 p.m. And I was told, you're leaving early. So I said, no, I don't think this is for me. And I ended up leaving that organization. There were other things that were happening as a part of it. I remember I had this conversation with my dad and he said, what are you doing? This is a great job. I was the assistant employment manager. I was thinking to myself, gosh, am I leaving this really great job? I found the job at Orbital and I actually ended up making a little bit more money than what I made at Golden Lion. And I was a recruiter. I went from assistant manager to a recruiter, took a step back in that one. But it was for balance. It was for opportunity. It was to be able to spend more time with the kids. Ultimately, it led to me working from home, which was really cool back then. There was a team lead position. I didn't get it the first time, but I got it the second time. When I think about that entire career trajectory, when I left Orbital, I was a director there. I took a step back to senior manager. It wasn't as much pay. It was a lesser title that I had. The optic there was I was going to get the global experience, and that's where I got all the tools, technology under my belt, overseeing recruiting excellence. Yeah. So went to Elmer from there. Okay. So took a step back and I knew I took less pay. Again, single mom, that was a hard decision. And there was another decision back at Orbital when I think about it, is I was able to do one of two things. I was running this account that was a highly successful account, but it was hard, man. That thing was hard. And I was overseeing it. I was the team lead for it. I was offered this opportunity to either do that role as an operations manager or be a project launch lead and learn even more. Again, operations manager was a little bit more money. Project launch lead was a little bit less money. I chose the role that was going to help me learn and help me grow and get to where I wanted to be. So I chose that project launch lead role instead. My boss said, I can't pay you as much as this operations position. And I chose the learning. So did that again. She left and she went to Elmer, which is how I got to Elmer. And she was honest, I can't get you to the salary you're at. You're going to have to take a little bit less, but you will get the global experience. I want you over tools and technology and recruiter excellence. This is the opportunity. This is the job. And I chose it for that global experience because at that time, Orbital was not global. When I think about those times and really focusing on what can I learn? How can I grow? How can I shift it? I always made sure that I could take care of my family. I was a sole provider. I don't know if a lot of people know that. You know that because you know me very well. Did not get any child support, did not get anything. I raised those boys 100% on my own. Sometimes people would help me out here and there, like my mom and my dad when I was really struggling, but I did it on my own. I had to make decisions at the same time as one, I'm the sole provider in doing this and raising two boys on my own. And then also, how do I grow my career and how do I get to the place that I want to be? Because we talked about in the last episode, and I admittedly said, I worked for titles, I worked for dollars and to increase my income. So when I think about those pieces of it and then continuing on in my career, after leaving Elmer and going to Clover, there was also another point in time where I had to make that decision. I couldn't come in as even a senior manager. I had to come in as a consultant. I believed in my abilities, right? In what we were trying to do. I had to recover an account. I knew I could do that, hands down, hand over fist, and then work my way into another role, to which was I went from that consultant to a senior manager. I did not get the director spot because when I interviewed for the director spot, the person that was interviewing me said she did not believe I had the experience that I said I had. Even though my boss knew I had the experience because she had worked with me throughout that career, she said I didn't have it. I said, that's fine. I'll prove it. I've always been that prove it person. I'm okay with proving it. I'm okay with taking less. I'm okay with taking less of a title. I did prove it and then became a director from there and then a senior director. When I went to completely different division, it was a lateral to then take on the solutions design role to where I was doing global solution design, one of my favorite jobs I've ever done. There was no pay increase. It was a complete lateral. It's here's the opportunity. Here's the learning experience. We want you to go now build total talent solutions for others. From there, I remember a point in time where someone told me if you were under 40, you could not be a VP within that organization. So I knew that if I wanted to get to, it was a weird.
What does age have to do with it? That's kind of reverse age discrimination, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I mean, today, but then at the time, it was a normal thing. It was a normal operating. People knew it. There was one person, and I actually have met her and I know her personally now, that was one of the first people that was under 40 that became a VP, interestingly enough. So I knew to get to that next title, I probably needed to leave, even though I was asked to hang tight, and then went on to Helix VP role, and then went into the global strategist for people process technology across that organization, was recruited out to another higher level role, which was the senior vice president at MedTrackers, and then going into the higher role at Clover again, and then sitting in the place saying, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to pivot? What does this look like? Right. And then knowing, do I want to stay in this, kind of C-suite level, or do I want to do something different and change from a career perspective? I say all that to say that when we're thinking about our career, it's not upward necessarily mobility and upward path. There's decisions and times that come along where you have to decide to say, all right, what is my ultimate goal? Where do I want to be? And how do I need to pivot and change to do that? And what am I willing to give up? And sometimes it's dollars, sometimes it's titles, sometimes it's both. But then what are you also gaining and you're able to learn so then you can get that skill set or grab that skill set. So the long game, I feel like in my career, has been gathering skill sets and gathering skills in different ways. So from operations to solution design to sales to being able to understand and translate data and analytics to technology to process optimization, like all of those things sales piece of it, I've strategically done. So I know I have all of these tools in my tool belt, and it makes me one, a more robust person and individual when I'm looking at different situation scenarios and things like that. But two, it also fulfills me in the way that I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to do all those things. So just looking at that across, I think there's a lot of people who feel like or believe, or I think society tells us that it's supposed to be an upward path and you just continue to climb. You climb on that ladder and you just keep climbing until you get to the top of that ladder. But that's not always the case, and that's not always how you get to the place that you really enjoy in your career. I don't know. What about you? Tell me, your path, what's been unique about it? What decisions have you made that are different?
I think that's true that people always think of it as having to be sort of an upward trajectory. Um, and going up isn't necessarily for everybody because, it theoretically, the bigger your title, the more responsibility, the more pressure that's on you. I mean, if you want to be a CEO, that obviously comes with a certain amount of, responsibility and accountability that not everybody's going to be interested in, and certainly a lot more money. But, once you've made a lot of money, you kind of have to keep doing it. So I'm not like I think I said on the last episode, I'm not married to a title. I don't care about that as long as I feel like I'm getting respect. But, and so sometimes, outside of that, people may not always understand because they do know titles, especially if you're part of a large organization. Smaller organization, that's different. People wear a lot more hats. It's a different infrastructure. But yeah, I mean, I think when I was much younger, I had been in retail for years, and retail management is one of those things where it's great for setting you up to stay in a retail career, right? It's like one of those things where you have all this experience of working with people and problem solving and a lot of stuff that is critical to other jobs. But it's one of those things where sometimes people can't see that and that there's crossover. So I was able to actually move into a different role through a friend who got me into a company, and then that kind of changed it. Was it kind of changed the trajectory that I was on when I wanted to get out of retail. um and the over the years that has evolved, because like I remember when I was actually working at that particular company, and they were closing down the location that I was at. And so I knew that my position was being eliminated. And so they were like, take as much time to try and find another job and whatever. And I was interviewing for a couple of jobs, and that's when 9/11
Mm,
happened. And so I was like having the stress of like losing my job, and then that was happening. And then I remember going and interviewing somewhere for a job, and I actually knew somebody there. I ended up getting a job working as an office manager for a friend, and that was going to be a short-term thing. I was thinking about going back to school. Like I was like really in a, what does it all mean? What do I want to
mm,
do now? That a lot of people were in post 9/11. And so I started working for them, and then I ended up staying and really enjoying that. And then they kind of were going through some financial problems, and they had to give up their office. So I've gone through all these like transitions of like losing my job through no fault of my own. But you know, like in 2001, the company had been acquired by another company, and the other company just didn't really want to have all these other offices that were part of it. And so they shut down a bunch, so that was part, it was through an acquisition, et cetera. So I've been through it times, but I've always usually been able to land a job sometimes within a few days, sometimes within a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, never this long. Even when I ended up following you to Elmer, I think I was unemployed then like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks or something between those two. And now I'm coming up on a full year of being unemployed since I left Clover, which is crazy. Like I've never been in this
yeah.
place where I can't, and I've had a lot of weird, hey, maybe if you want to send us leads, we'll send you a commission kind of situation. I'm like, what? What is that? I've never, had these types of things, and trying to do things to make extra money. Well, just make any money, really, not even extra. So I know a lot of people are dealing with it, as I was talking about in our last episode, other people that I've connected with in a similar situation. It's really frustrating because you feel like I can't imagine like pivoting my career again at at this point in my life. Like I don't want to, like during COVID, I was kind of thinking about exploring some different things that I was interested in. And then I was like, I don't really want to do, like to try and build up like from
Mm-hmm.
zero essentially just doesn't sound
Yeah.
great. But yeah, not at this juncture.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, I know kind of what the minimum amount is I need to make. And I've had people say, oh, well, this job only pays. And I'm like, that's fine. That's great. I would take that in a minute. And so it's really interesting because I think there is a lot of like, I don't know what it is because I mean, I've talked to other people about this too, and they've said that the same thing. Like they're prejudging your experience that you'll want to make a certain amount of money or have a certain title. And it's like, no, it's not even about
Hmm.
that. Like I just want to work. And I'm not like, I don't want to just take any job necessarily, but at this point I would probably. But it's just an interesting place
Yeah.
to be.
I was talking to someone a little bit earlier and we were talking about skills based things moving to more skills based when you think about your traditional career trajectories or things of that nature and looking for a role. And what she was saying is, there's a gap even there, hiring someone that has these specific skills, not necessarily the experience. Let's say it's out of the industry, whatever the case may be. There's not an alignment and there's a lot of education happening based on these skills you're acquiring. Now you need to look and evaluate the job for what it is. When you think about the professional level job, if you want someone that has this skill or these skills to come in, even though you're open to training or things like that, then you have to reevaluate what you're looking for from a pay perspective. And it's misaligned today because what's also happening, you need these skills. That's actually a higher level. So now you need to look and reevaluate that pay overall. So I think we're seeing this big shift in the market as we look at what's happening with technology, how automation is coming in. What do companies really need when they think about optimization of roles and of their process and everything else? Now, what skills do they need to assess that? And we're going through this whole, I feel like it's a reiteration of what the world of work looks today and how it looks. As I put on the lens and I think about my journey or the career that I've had or the decisions that I've made throughout it, gathering skills for less or gathering skills for less title. I want to grab this global experience. I want to learn this piece of the business. I want to focus here and do that. I think it becomes even more important as you look across how do you want to bring people into your organization and train them too, to say, okay, let's reassess this job. Let's reevaluate it. Let's look at it. Who do we need from a skills perspective to do that? And to your point, there's a lot of people I think that are out there for a really long time that are looking, and these employers are going through, okay, some are ghosting. Let's just be honest about how it looks today. Sometimes you don't even get a response. You're applying into this black hole and you're applying to thousands of jobs, right? Or hundreds of jobs. There was someone I was talking to last week. She was saying she sits at her computer and she's applying for over, 30 jobs a day. And the amount, she has a tracker and she's measuring it. She's gotten a couple of conversions where she's having conversations. One would be a, lower pay. Another one, she was like, I think they're trying to scare me out of the jobs. I got to message her to say, hey, how'd it go and what's going on. But this is a full-time job. Like, looking for a job has become a full-time job. And I was reading something that was saying too, that you leave the place where you're employed, you log out, that was your last job, and you go back to that same desk without the teams, without the meetings, without now you're just applying for your job and it's a full-time job. And that's a whole mental piece to it too. I know we're talking about like career progression, but when you're still in the same place, in the same space, and then now you're in this place where you're trying to find something and get ahead and being able to apply to it, change this office. When I think about it, people are like, oh, that's cool. Why'd you do that for? I was like, because I needed it to look nothing like it looked in the past. And I wanted to redo it and make sure that when I was coming in here, I had a different experience too at the same, yes, because I couldn't
Yeah,
go
that
back
makes
into
sense.
the same place, same environment, I would feel like it was the same. There's so many people out there looking, to your point, for a year, 6 months. It could even be 3 months, feels really long when you don't have a job. I mean, it's a long time, but then you're going back. And if you have worked remote, you're going and sitting in the same place and you're just reliving it all again. So, anyways, I just wanted to kind of pause and say that.
When I was working before, well, I think, well, I mean, I can totally see that point because you're right. Like, even when I lost my job a year ago, um, I had to wrap up pretty quickly, and then I just was at my work, essentially because I was home for indefinitely. But then I moved to a different room, earlier this year. So I am actually in a different spot than I was the entire time I
Mhm.
worked there. So in a way, it does different. I know what you're talking about because that's absolutely true. Like if you don't have the ability to move into a different room or change your location in some
Yeah.
way, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
interesting.
I think it becomes really hard mentally when you're just kind of doing the same thing every day. But this market and what we're seeing, I've never seen anything like it. When we were looking at the jobs report, right? And you're seeing, one, I think that number that is saying that workforce participation is remaining about the same. It just hasn't caught up. I know it hasn't caught up. There's no way that it has. It's just such an uncertain time and you have more people looking for the optimization pieces of it. It's hard to even find footing, traction. People want to think about what's next for me. How do I reshape this? How do I remold this? But right now, I think the majority of people are really in survival mode, right? So when you think about how do I just get through today, and it could be something from a job perspective, it could be mentally because there's so much coming at us in the world right now. As we continue to move forward, it's how do we look at it? What's the perspective that we're able to push outwardly because it's very easy to me to get caught up in and I had this period of time and this was I shared a writing with someone that I wrote. It was in September of last year. And it was in this place where I was really trying to sort out what was on the inside and happening on the inside of me. And I was really questioning to say, why am I here? Internally, I was still struggling with what is my purpose and why am I here? And I think that's also a common thing to go through as we're trying to find our footing in life and as these, situations happen, the world around us sometimes feels like it's collapsing and then our world at the same time isn't, as stable as maybe it once was. I just want people to know on that like, they're not alone. Everyone feels like that at some time, or most people. I won't say everyone. I don't know how everyone feels, but the conversations that I'm having and with the cycle of life that a lot of us are going through right now, I know that's a very common thought, which is really hard. And it's hard to come out of and being able to find the strength to come out of that and then continue to move forward. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, definitely survival mode and feeling of being resilient and stuff. And it's just one of those things where you're like, at some point, you get to a point where you're thinking, I'm tired of having to be
Yeah.
so resilient.
Yes.
Like, I'm tired of having, like, I would just like to not have to
Yeah.
worry every day and be thinking about, okay, I need to pay this today. But how much money do I have so that I can pay this? And I have until, what day before I have to, pay my car insurance or it's going to lapse or whatever the case may be. That becomes very real, and it's like, man, I would just give anything to have a regular paycheck again so that I can, that it's not every day I'm having to worry about, what new thing is going to
Yeah.
come up.
Yeah, I think there's a time where you're like, to your point, I don't want to be. Why do I have to be so resilient? Why do I have to bounce back? Why do I have to continue to move forward? Why do I have to have so much grit? Right? Can I just?
I've got a lot of grit. I've got a
Yeah,
lot of grit at this point. Yeah, so I'm good. I'm good
enough
on
is
that.
enough. Enough is enough.
And I went through a real existential crisis a few years ago where I was like, I was not happy with where I was in my career, the different company. Like things just nothing was going well. It's just a lot of stuff was going on. And I was like, life can't just be about making money to pay your bills. Although right now I would love to make money and pay my bills, right? But at the same time, you know what I mean? You can get into those like mind things of like, what am I doing with my life? Because they say like, in order to be happy, the basics have to be settled, and then you have to like have something to
Yeah.
look forward to, like immediate stuff to look forward to, and then like further stuff. But when you're just in survival mode and you're just trying to make ends meet, like just trying to cover the basics, it becomes really
Yeah.
difficult, I mean, I just know that there's so many people who are dealing with the same thing. And it's sad, because like we live in a country where there's a lot of incredibly wealthy people, and there's so many of us that are struggling who were doing okay, but then you lose one job and, everything kind of falls
Yep.
apart.
And think about one, careers, two, pivots, three, our current market, four, I don't know. I feel like a lot of us are in survival mode just with what's happening in the world. I mean, there's just so much going on. It's really important,
Right.
I think now more than ever, to one, there's people that keep you sane, holding close to those people that you need. Two, figuring out how do you keep going. And I'm trying to like really rack my brain to say, when I've been at my point in time where I'm like, I am at my breaking point, or maybe I have already broken. There's some times where I just broke. And how did I pull myself
Right.
back up out of that? How do you continue to move forward? Like, where do you find that source of strength? I think a lot of people find it in many different ways. And I think really knowing where you pull
Sure.
that from.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. It's just that thing of, it's hard to be resilient when just the bare minimum is
Yeah,
difficult. You know,
absolutely.
it's one thing if you have a job and you're doing, you're covering your expenses, and then something else happens in your life, like maybe a death or something like that. That's a different kind of, but it's harder when you lost your job and you can't find another job, and then you're kind of mourning that aspect of things, because I think it is kind of a mourning of like, mourning who you thought you were at that time, or with the job that you had and the people you worked with and that sort of person that you were at that time. And now you're a different version of yourself. So I think there's part of that. And when you work and you're a sole supporter, or um even if you're not, but you're making money and it gives you autonomy to
Yeah.
do what you want. And so when you don't have that, it's much more complex than I think anybody gives it credit for. You
I,
know? Like we all
yeah,
know, but really get
I would agree with that. When I think about the point in time, because there's a lot of people that are going through this right now. There's a lot of people in the same boat. And when I think about anytime you strip away a part of your identity, or a part of your identity is stripped away from you, and maybe it's by no control of your own, right? It's circumstances, it's situation, everything else. That's always a really hard time. And it can show up in many different ways. I feel like it can show up in this way, like that you've been talking about. It can show up in a moment of change where you maybe have experienced the death of a loved one. Maybe it's a lifelong partner. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's even a disease that you get and you're trying to heal from. I think there's so many points in time in our lives as humans alone that we go through this very restripping of ourselves and trying to find who we are again, and really saying, who am I authentically? And we weave so much around one, what we do for work and income and being able to provide, because that's the way our society is set up. And
right.
there's a lot of times that people are just heads down. And I've been the same way, right? I'm trying to grow a career and heads down. I don't know who I am outside of this job, or outside of this work, or outside of being a mom and making sure my kids were surviving and providing for them and they're able to, do different things throughout their lives. When you come to the point of being stripped down, I think really understanding who you are as a human, who you are as a person, how you choose to live your life. Are you living through heart, or how do you live becomes really important, because if you don't have those, I'll call them straws. I don't know what else to call them. Because if you don't have those, or the anchors, like I always talk about my anchors too with Richard, and we have all these conversations, like having those anchors and knowing what they are and saying, this is core to who I am. This is core to my belief. This is core in how I bring myself up and I bring myself out of things. I think we can get really, really lost. And when you lose those, like I've lost them from time to time, I've lost who I am and have had to refine myself. So I think, sometimes are harder than others too. How far do we break down before we build back up? That's also a big piece of it. But man, it's hard. It's hard. And I think no matter when you're going through it, right? So each situation feels like you're just trudging through and just trying to get through and trying to get along. And how do you, when does that break? When does that stop? When you get to that next point, that next place, and when you can't see it, it makes it so much harder.
Yeah,
You feel
for
like it,
sure.
you don't see the end.
No. Or do you think you do? Because, like, maybe you're interviewing, you think, one of these things is going to work out. And then when it doesn't, you're like, all right, I got to start that over again. You know what I mean? Like, you know, yeah, it's a constant challenge, I guess.
I feel like I'm one of those people that I need what is the next thing to grab onto so that I can pull myself there and pull myself there and pull myself there. It's, yeah,
I have to be busy. Like, I'm a person who, I mean, I will take time to rest and recuperate and stuff, but I have to, like when I lost my last job, when that ended, I took like a few days to just kind of decompress and kind of process it, whatever. And then I set myself up like a very, not a tight schedule, but a kind of a rigid schedule of like certain things I was going to do every day, and then certain things I was going to do certain days of the week so that I could keep myself
hmm,
accountable. And that really helped a lot. If I don't get to something one day, I'll try to do it the next day or whatever. It's a little mind numbing in a way, but it's just a way to have some routine. If I make sure, like, get up and get dressed and do all those things. Otherwise, you could just like stay in your pajamas all day, and that's not great. Right. I mean, it happens sometimes, but it's not the best idea.
yeah. Wherever we are, we got to just meet ourselves there. I know there were days when I first left Clover and I'm like, I'm not doing anything today. I'm taking a nap. But then you get to this place, to your point, where you're trying to move forward and you're like, I gotta get out. I gotta do these things. I gotta, you know, put on the clothes, do something that's going to make a difference, or that's going to make an impact, or just a little baby step, a little movement in the needle, anything. It's keeping at it every day. Exhausting.
Yeah, because I remember when I wasn't working during COVID, that was such a weird time. And a lot of people were like, oh, use this time to do this. But I spent most of that time just trying to
Yep.
find work. And so this time I was like, well, let me try to balance it with finding work with doing other things and stuff too. And that definitely has helped. But because if all you do is look for work, that can drive you
Yeah.
crazy too. Like there's been times where I'm like, I'm not looking for anything this week because I can't. I've just done too many applications. I don't even know how you would find 30 legitimate jobs that you could apply for every day that are unique to you, unless you were looking for things outside of your specific
Say it
specific I
fast.
can't say
Say
it
it really fast.
specific. Yes.
Specificity.
Specificity. I don't know. Anyway, unless you were looking for things outside of your expertise.
If I have a shot at this, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
because
apply
you're
for it,
clogging up.
right? Like, is that my at least 80% here?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's good if I yeah, I feel like, and then I would go through periods of time where I'd find a ton of jobs to apply for, and then other times where there's very little. And right now, I feel like there's more things opening up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna be considered. Or now people want, hybrid of a certain location or on site, which I would go on site if that was the only option. but where we happen to live, there's just not a lot of opportunities. And when I've applied to things that are outside of, people are like, "Oh, you don't live there." I'm like, "Yeah, but we could move
Mhm.
there." Like, like there was like if we want to move back to Sacramento, so I've applied to jobs there under the idea of like if they're hybrid, like okay, I could go and be there a couple days. I have friends there, maybe we could stay with, or I could stay with or whatever, and then come back home until we're able to actually move there. But nothing.
Yeah. Hey y'all, it's Jennifer of the Worksties. That was part 1 of 2 of episode 16. There are 2 things that I'm good at. It is awkward pauses and Irish exits. That was a awkward ending on that one. It was the right place to end. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed the real content and the conversation that we had about career pathing journey and what it's like looking for a job today. Tune in to part 2 of the episode. We're talking all about one of our favorite topics, Indeed, their direct apply and what they're requiring from employers now and the potential impacts from that. Check out the show notes as well. We will have some information there about what Indeed is doing and what that might mean in full detail, because it is all conversation as we walk through that. Shout out to socialjobs.com for sponsoring the chaos of the Worksties. Until next time, bye.